Hello again. So, in class lately, we have been covering some of the classic textbook content on visual object perception, where the overall idea is that we want to understand how visual perception figures out what's in the world and is doing that based on incomplete information. So, for example, like the fact that we only have a two-dimensional image on the retina, but we're trying to infer the shapes of three-dimensional objects and spaces and like distances from that two-dimensional image. So the information that we're getting visually is incomplete in a way, and our visual systems have to try to like figure out what's really out there. Right? An assumption that we're making when we take that approach is that these three-dimensional objects that we're trying to understand actually exist in the world. Right? So this coffee cup, I'm perceiving that the coffee cup is there, and all of what we're learning about from the textbook about how do I know that's a coffee cup is assuming that the coffee cup is a real object that really is like the way that I'm understanding it in my mind. But what if our representation of the world is actually not accurate in that way? Specifically, what if the representation of the world is not built to show us what is out there as it really is, but instead it's just sort of presenting us with a useful fiction that is able to be good for our survival and reproduction. So I've given you this idea, okay, I've given to you in a reading that's on Canvas by Donald Hoffman and colleagues that's called The Interface Theory of Perception. And the interface theory of perception proposes this kind of idea in it, and it's based on evolutionary theory. So what I want you to do is look over that article before you do the rest of this exercise I'm about to talk about. You don't need to worry about understanding all of the math and everything that's in the article, because it gets a little bit more in-depth than we necessarily need to. But what I would recommend that you also do is watch the TED Talk by Hoffman, which I've given you a link to on Canvas, and that should help. If you're looking at the article and listening to what he's saying in the talk, it'll help a lot to interpret what's in that article, because he makes it in a lot more plain language in the TED Talk. So if you haven't done those things yet, stop this video and come back later. Okay, so hopefully now you have done that and you've familiarized yourself with the interface theory idea. So I have a little journaling assignment for you. In your journal, here's what I'd like for you to do. We're going to draw another diagram, right? So a couple episodes ago we drew Plato's cave. This time I want you to draw a basic diagram. We're not looking for anything fancy necessarily, just so that I can see what it is. But it should be a simple hypothetical device that would provide an interface for some physical aspect of the world. So here's how I want you to think about this. Imagine that you're inside of some kind of chamber, like a spaceship or a submarine or something, and you're in this submarine and there's no windows or anything or any other direct way to interact with the outside environment. But what you do have is an instrument display that can tell you about what's in the world. Okay. And to make your job easier as the submarine or spaceship operator, The instruments that are on your instrument panel are going to give you an output that is telling you about the safety of the outside environment. So that way you can know whether it's okay to open the hatch and go out of the chamber or not. So the device that, in your diagram, the device that I'm asking you for you to draw is going to be one of these instrument panel instruments. So you could like draw your little chamber, draw the little instrument on the instrument panel, and also diagram something about what that instrument does outside of the chamber. So it's one of these instruments. It'll take some physical property. So on the outside of the chamber, it should take some physical property or dimension of the environment. And then on the inside of the chamber, on the instrument panel, there should be, this is just a diagram, but translated into a little display where it's telling the user in some simple kind of way about the safety of the environment outside the chamber based on that physical property. So hopefully this makes sense. It's meant to be a very simple idea. Chamber, that has some kind of person in it, and they're getting a display about the safety of the outside of the environment, the outside environment of the chamber, from a little instrument panel display that is based off of some kind of measurement outside. Okay? So label the diagram so I can tell what is the physical property of the world and how the safety dimensions being presented to the user of the device in the interface. Don't overthink it. Make it simple, as long as it's doing what I said about measuring something outside and then giving a display to the user about environmental safety that's based on that measurement. Once you've done this, also I'd like for you to write down a few thoughts about 2 questions. So here's 2 questions for you. Number 1, is the device in your diagram analogous to any of the human sensory systems like the ones that we've been studying this semester? That's question number 1. Number 2, if you compare your diagram on this exercise back to your diagram of Plato's cave, what are some similarities and differences between those analogies for perception? Do you find them to be very much the same, or are there some key differences between the way that you thought of Plato's cave as an analogy for perception versus the submarine instrument panel as an analogy for perception? And depending on what you think, write down a few sentences for me about that. Okay, look forward to reading them. Thank you.